Welcome everybody. Today I would like to share with you a game I've played in the Austrian Bundesliga. And I've played this game against Croatian Grandmaster Marin Bosiocic, rated 26-15. And it was played in the 5th round of the Austrian Bundesliga and I was playing with the white pieces. So let's get to it. I start the game with 1e4. He replied with e5 and we go for the Roy Lopez here. a6, bishop a4, d6. I was a little bit surprised to see this move, but I faced it before. Maybe you've seen that game as well, where I played against Andrew Tang. No, actually that was another game, never mind. But it was similar. Anyway, I faced it before against Justin Sarkar. And here I played a very direct d4. And now he took with the pawn. Sarkar played b5 against me. But this is a very solid way to proceed for black, and we reach this position. A lot of simplifications now. A few pieces have been traded, but white has this tiny edge because white controls the center and has a little bit more space. So I was not unhappy with how this went. And I vaguely remembered looking at this and coming up with this strange idea to provoke h6 here. Black has to go h6 because castle could be answered with e5. That would be unpleasant. Black could not take because this would leave a piece hanging on e7. So therefore black goes h6 and now I play the bishop back to e3. And I was pondering during the game, did it really make that much sense to provoke h6? But in some cases, black would like to go g6, especially to control the f5 square, and then it's useful to have h6 as a target. Alright, well, maybe I have to do some more study here to get into the details. Castle, rook a d1. Now queen e6. I think rook a d8 would be a simpler way to proceed. But queen e6 is okay, rook e1, all these moves are natural, bring the rooks into the center of the board, rook e8, and now I played h3, take away the square on g4, and get some space for my king, just in case, for the future. And he replied with c6, which is a standard move to stop me going knight d5, and also to prepare d5 in the future. I played queen b6, targeting this pawn. He goes rook a b8. Now bishop f4. There's some ideas with e5 now, so he replies knight d7, and I bring the queen back to d4. Knight e5. Now this pawn is hanging, so he protects it by going knight e5. And I play bishop g3. I was happy with this move because it asks some questions. Notice the threat of going f4 followed by f5. For example, rook bd8, I could play f4, I thought knight d7, f5, queen f6, and now take on d6. And the computer doesn't think it is that much, I'm seeing that right now. But it is a pawn after all, so I think white is a bit better. He played queen g6 to stop f4, and here I played knight to e2. I could also play something like king h2 or b3. But I like knight e2 to renew this idea of f4, f5, and in general the knight is not very well placed on c3 anyway. Doesn't have a perspective there. Here he played a surprising move to me, h5, and I think this might be the start of his problems. Instead, either rook bd8 or even bishop f6, because if I take on d6, now he could play rook bd8 and black's piece get really active. I think this is a very possible pawn sacrifice. So h5 played. There's the obvious threat now to go h4 knight f3. So I go queen to e3 to stop that. He goes h4, bishop h2. Now I'm covering f3, so there's no fork of the knight. And he plays knight c4 instead. Probably rook b8 would be better here, but I wouldn't be unhappy either. I can play knight d4, maybe the knight can come to f5. Computer says it's fine. I think white has a little bit of a push. Knight c4, queen c3, protecting my pawn. He goes b5. Notice the threat of bishop to f6. So I have to go b3, bishop f6. This is a pretty forced sequence. He has to go back. And I go here. And when I calculated this, I was quite happy because the knight looks pretty on e5, but it's kind of unstable. I always have this f4, f5 ideas. And the main problem for black is this pawn on d6, which needs to be protected. And also I have the potential idea of going knight d4, knight f5. I felt like here a lot of my pieces are in the right squares. Still, the position is not that clear. So d5 here would not be a good idea for black. I shouldn't take on d5 because of knight g4. And black will be definitely fine, trading off this bishop. But I can go f4, and now if the knight moves, I have f5 hitting rook and queen, and I'll win the exchange. So this looks promising. Rook bd8 would be one way to proceed. My opponent played bishop d8 to stop f4, because then he can go bishop to b6. But I played knight d4, bishop b6, and now queen f4 to unpin the knight, and now I'm ready to bring my knight to f5. So I think here black's already in some trouble, but bishop takes d4 is a mistake. Probably best would be something like bishop a5, and now rook bd8. But honestly, I cannot believe that this is okay for black with the weakness on h4, weakness on d6. This looks like white has an edge here. My opponent took on d4, rook takes, and rook e6, and still black has this problem. I cannot take on h4 because of knight f3, which is actually the reason I played king f1 now, to stop any knight f3 ideas and also protect my rook on e1 with the king in case he tries something like opening up with d5 to e file. Now queen h7. Here I played rook ed1, which is natural to increase the pressure. It would have been stronger to play queen d2 with the same idea, but also having this option once again, f4, f5. This already gives a huge advantage for white. But I played rook ed1. Knight g6, queen f5. Also here the white position is clearly better, which is also optically very obvious. And now I took on d6. Finally I won this pawn. And I'm now simply a healthy pawn up. My next task was primarily to get to the 40th move and get some extra time on the clock, which I managed. Now queen e3, threatening mate, but I can just return. Queen d2. Obviously black wants to keep queens on the board because that allows him to create more threats against my king, gives him more counterplay. Here I played c4 to open up some more files for my rooks. f3, protecting the pawn, and now we've reached a time control. I'm a healthy pawn up and pretty much winning. Still, as they say, nothing as difficult as winning one positions, and this is what I also felt here. Obviously, white can do a number of things, also create a passed pawn, but I felt first of all I want to reduce the potential my opponent has. So I played rook d8, which is a fine move, I think. He took the rook, king h7, and now I brought my queen back. Central spot here, queen d4, seemed very natural to me. Knight e5, and here I made a mistake. I played a little bit too quickly, took the knight on e5. Instead, queen c5 would have been very unpleasant for my opponent because I'm pinning the knight, and it's not clear how black is going to make progress. And also, I'm somewhat threatening now to take on e5. Let's say black goes something like g6. Okay, also I don't have to take, but if I take, either we get a rook endgame, which I think is very, very good for me. I think this is close to winning, if not winning. Or black takes with the rook, but then I can take another pawn, for example. Okay, also no need to do this there. Anyway, this pin is unpleasant, and if f6, I can just start pushing my pawn, and black is very slow with his potential counterplay. There's no knight takes f3 still because of the pin. This looks winning for white. And it is. After bishop takes e5, position changes and my advantage has decreased. Rook c1. In the next few moves, I'm not really making much progress, honestly. Looking back at it now, I was just trying to make sensible moves, but only black has made progress over the last few moves, improved his queen and rook position, and it felt like to me it's going in the wrong direction. Also, it's getting a little bit low on time again, so I repeated moves here. Here I should probably push a4 right away. I mean, this is the only way to do something. I played rook c1, and now I went a4. Takes, rook d6. Black really has some ideas here against my king, so I have to be careful. I played queen e3, and here was fortunate that my opponent just blundered. He should play something like queen e5, and I think with best play, black should definitely hold this position. But my opponent played c5, and it turns out I can just take this pawn with my queen. I think my opponent wants to go rook d2 now and checkmate me, but it's actually white who comes first, the queen h5 and rook c8. So I believe this is what my opponent missed. So I could win a second pawn, and I was happy to do that. g6. And now I blundered right back, more or less. I'm not giving away my winning advantage, but it makes it more difficult. Queen c4. I should play king h1. This is smart to stop rook d2, to parry it with rook g1, and then with my two extra pawns, I think it's got to be winning here. It's got to be winning. Maybe still some precision needed, but white should win. Queen c4. Honestly, I mean, this is somewhat embarrassing, but I thought rook d2 wasn't possible because of queen takes f7 and queen f8 and rook c7. Well, obviously rook c7 should not be played because black can take this rook. So I would need to give a perpetual here. Alright, so after rook d2, I shouldn't take on f7, but play queen f1 instead, which obviously was not the idea. Still, white keeps winning chances, but this would have made my task much more difficult. My opponent played queen f4, a5. I didn't see anything wrong with that. King h6, rook a1, bringing the rook behind. a6 would be a way to go wrong here. Black could take this pawn. So, little trick. That one I saw, rook a1, rook d2, and black is still creating threats, so I have to be careful. Here, king h1 might have been a good prophylactic move. I play queen f1, now queen e5, and now a6 is another mistake. Very natural move, but makes my task much more difficult. Again, king h1, queen b2, and now something like rook d1 would have been a better way to go forward. Still, it's not totally clear yet how white is going to win because black is so active. After a6, I was expecting queen b2. Here the problem for white is that after a7, black has this trick, rook takes g2, and it's a draw. Either king h1, black repeats moves, or I take and black takes and regains the pawn and nothing to be done. So after queen b2, I want to go queen c1. This enables me to trade queens, but black gets the rook behind the pawn. Still, I believe that this should be winning. Either I get my pawn to a 7th rank, or I win this pawn. My king is somewhat misplaced, but I have two connected passed pawns here, potential connect passed pawns. So I believe this should be winning, but not that clear. This definitely is the best black can get. My opponent, however, played queen d4 check, which is a huge blunder. I can now play king h1, and after queen b2, well, let me ask you, what's the difference now compared to with the king on g1? What can I do now? Well, I can just play a7. and my opponent resigned because after rook takes g2, I'm not going to take this. This is the difference. Black doesn't take with check, and instead I can just queen, and rook h2 is the last check Black gives, because now after rook g2, I would be just taking this rook, and my rook is defended, and obviously I have an extra queen. So my opponent resigned after a7. And I was quite happy with this win against a very strong opponent. Not so happy was I with my play in the second half of the game. I think the first half was good, where I got the winning advantage, but the second half, converting this winning position was somewhat troublesome, and we both made some mistakes there. And I was somewhat lucky that my opponent blundered twice, first giving me another pawn and then in the end as well, to make my task much easier. Otherwise, I'm not sure if with best play I could have won this game. Alright, so I want to share this one with you. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions about it in the comments, and I wish you all a very good day. See you soon. Bye.